You're tired, though you may not have realized it yet. Tired not just in body, but from pushing too hard, from trying to control what lies beyond your reach, from insisting, from fighting, from resisting, and deep down, sensing that the more force you exert, the less peace you find. The mistake isn't in trying, but in not knowing when to let go, not realizing that true strength is forged in acceptance. Like the river that doesn't force the current, it simply flows. Like the tree that doesn't fight the wind, it simply bends. Stoicism has always known this. Marcus Aurelius, even surrounded by power and grand decisions, understood that forcing life is futile, that what truly sets us free is lucid surrender, the wisdom not to impose, but to accompany. Seneca emphasized, serenity doesn't come from brute strength, but from harmony with the natural order of the universe. Living isn't about control, but about flow. This video is an invitation for you to stop forcing life, so that, based on 10 Stoic lessons, you may cultivate a solid, silent, and lasting inner peace. Because you don't need to force to be strong. You don't need to fight to be free. You only need to be where you are and allow life to follow its course. As soon as you begin to accept, the first great lesson emerges. And when you understand that you no longer need to force, the first great lesson arises. The starting point for those who seek true peace, accepting what is beyond your control. There's a silent mistake many make throughout life, trying to control everything. As if destiny were a machine that, with enough effort, could be adjusted, manipulated, forced to follow the desired direction. This impulse creates an invisible burden, a constant weight, an anxiety that corrodes peace and wears down the soul. Taking on a load that no one can carry is one of the subtlest forms of self-violence. Epictetus, with the clarity of one who achieved inner freedom, taught, "Some things are up to us, others are not." This distinction isn't merely theoretical, it's the threshold between anguish and serenity. Freeing yourself from the desire to control the uncontrollable is the first step toward peace. It's the silent and firm gesture of one who understands that letting go isn't weakness, but wisdom. When anxiety arises, when your chest tightens, and your mind insists on seeking solutions for what's beyond your reach, there's a question that can transform everything. Is this up to me or not? If it's not, let go. If it is, act with excellence, but without the illusion that total control is possible. Like the sailor who learns to adjust the sails but never tries to change the wind, so too does one who accepts the limits of their own power, discovers paradoxically. Because it's in accepting the limit that relief is born. It's in recognizing powerlessness that true power is found, the power to live in peace regardless of circumstances. Soon, by accepting this limit, you realize that true strength isn't in forcing, but in knowing when to let go. And this leads us to the next lesson, about the illusion of forced strength. And when you begin to release what isn't up to you, the second great truth emerges. Not all persistence is a sign of strength. Often, insisting is merely disguised fear. There's a cultivated, almost venerated image that those who persist to the end, who never give up, who persevere against all odds, are necessarily strong. But not all persistence is virtue. Often, insisting is merely fear of admitting that something has come to an end. It's a desperate attachment, a gesture closer to weakness than to strength. Seneca, with his unwavering clarity, said, "It's not because things are difficult that we do not dare, but because we do not dare that they are difficult." This thought reveals an uncomfortable truth. Often, we persist not because we're brave, but because we're afraid. Afraid of change, afraid to let go, afraid to acknowledge that the effort no longer makes sense. Recognizing when effort has turned into self-destructive stubbornness is a gesture of profound maturity. It's realizing that there are battles that exist only because we refuse to release them. It's understanding that true strength isn't in insisting at all costs, but in knowing when to stop, when to redirect, when to free oneself from the need to win. Like the warrior who doesn't release the broken sword, even knowing it's no longer fit for battle, so too does one who insists without reflection remain clinging to tools that no longer serve, only wait. Letting go isn't weakness, it's wisdom. It's a silent act of courage that allows life to follow its course, while you follow yours, lighter, clearer, more at peace. And when you understand that insisting isn't always strength, you also realize there's a time to let go. Then you recognize that impermanence is inevitable, and that's what we discuss now. And when you realize that insisting can be weakness, you also discover that impermanence isn't a flaw, it's the rule, not the exception. Many resist change as one clings to a tree branch during a storm. They believe stability is natural, that permanence is a right, that what is loved or achieved must, by justice, last forever. But life isn't static. Impermanence isn't a system error, it's its deepest essence. Marcus Aurelius, with the silent wisdom of one who commanded empires and battles, understood everything natural is fleeting. This understanding isn't resignation, it's liberation. It's realizing that the nature of life is movement, transformation, the end that prepares the space for the beginning. Impermanence shouldn't be feared, but contemplated. The habit of daily contemplating the transience of things and relationships teaches us to let go before life tears it away. Teaches us to relinquish with dignity instead of being torn away with pain. Teaches us to say goodbye, to close cycles, to allow the new to arrive, without the bitter resistance of one who, in vain, wants to freeze time. Like the leaves that fall in autumn, not from weakness, but from biological wisdom, so too can we learn to let go. Not because we give up, but because we understand there's a right time for everything. And when that time comes, forcing is illusion, and letting go is freedom. Inner peace isn't built on attachment, but on fluidity, on the ability to welcome what comes and let go of what needs to leave. By learning to let go, you realize that excessive effort only distances you from your true essence. And that's what we continue with now. We live under the silent illusion that being constantly busy is a sign of personal worth. A full schedule, an exhausted body, a restless mind. All this is often interpreted as a sign of relevance, of importance, of strength. But not all effort is virtue, and not all busyness is necessary. Excess is often just an escape from oneself, a disguise to avoid facing emptiness or insecurity. Epictetus, with his lucid simplicity, reminded us, nothing grand is achieved with haste. True fulfillment doesn't come from forced effort, but from natural movement, from the flow that respects time, rhythm, the invisible order of things. Forcing life is trying to push it, but life isn't pushed. It follows, it circumvents, it transforms. Flowing with life is more effective than pushing it. It's realizing that nature accomplishes everything without excessive effort, that the river doesn't need to break the rock, but simply to go around it. It's recognizing that many of the activities that cause exhaustion have no purpose, have no essence. They're just automatic occupations that distance us from ourselves. Like the river that flows around obstacles without forcing them, but without stopping, so too can we learn to follow. It's not inertia, it's not passivity, it's serene intelligence. It's acting with intention, with awareness, with lightness, and not with the unconscious brutality of one who believes that the more force, the more life they'll have. Peace is born not from unmeasured effort, but from the ability to flow with what life offers, with what is, and not with what we wish it to be. As you begin to flow, you realize that many pains arise from internal resistance. And it's about this silent resistance that we reflect next. There's an invisible pain that arises not from what happens, but from how we resist what happens. Internal resistance is a silent tension, a counterforce that consumes energy and destroys serenity. Like one who believes that by tightening even more, they'll avoid the fall, but in reality only hurt themselves more. Like someone who clings to a rope in free fall, hurting their own hands, without realizing that letting go would be safer, wiser, lighter. Marcus Aurelius expressed this idea clearly. It's not what happens that disturbs a man, but the opinion he has about what happens. It's not the facts that destroy us, but the emotional resistance to them. The silent denial, the unconscious desire for the world to be different from what it is. It's in this space of internal opposition that the deepest suffering arises. Most pain isn't in the fact, but in the resistance to the fact. When we accept what cannot be changed, we find a freedom that seemed impossible. Acceptance isn't resignation, it's not passivity. It's a conscious adjustment, lucid to reality. An adaptation that allows life to continue while we remain whole. Like the tree that, by bending with the wind, doesn't break but survives, so too does one who learns to accept, preserve themselves, strengthen themselves, renew themselves. Rigidity leads to rupture, but flexibility leads to permanence. Peace doesn't come from winning all battles, but from understanding that many don't need to be fought. And that, by not resisting, we stop suffering. And by stopping suffering, we finally begin to live. By releasing this resistance, you understand that absolute control is just an illusion. And it is about how to relax this need for control that we now proceed. There are those who live with a clenched fist, tense muscles, eyes fixed on the horizon, trying to predict and manage every detail of life, as if by controlling everything, it would be possible to avoid pain, to prevent loss, to guarantee absolute security. But that control is an illusion, and worse, a destructive illusion that generates anxiety, frustration, and a deep exhaustion that corrodes the spirit. Seneca, with his unshakable serenity, taught, "Life is not about waiting for the storm to pass, but about learning to dance in the rain." It's not about escaping uncertainties, but about learning to move with them, to recognize that the unexpected is not a flaw in the system, but an essential part of it. The desire to control everything is often just anxiety disguised as competence, fear masked as efficiency. Establishing clear boundaries between planning and obsession is an act of wisdom. Planning is prudent, but trying to control every detail is unhealthy. It is necessary to perceive when healthy organization becomes a prison, when care turns into rigidity. Like the bird that flies because it trusts its wings, not because it controls the wind, so too must those who wish to live in peace learn to trust, not in a fixed destiny, but in their own capacity to adjust, to adapt, to start again whenever necessary. The control that is worthwhile is over oneself, not over the world. And when we relax the hand that grips too tightly, we create space for life to breathe, for the unexpected to surprise us, and for serenity to finally find us. When you relax, you realize that there is a right time for everything, and that forcing before the right time only hinders the flowering. It is about active patience that we now speak. In a world that values haste, urgency, and speed, learning to wait often seems like a setback, a weakness, a waste of time. But nature is never in a hurry, and yet everything is accomplished. Marcus Aurelius, with the wisdom of one who commanded legions and empires, understood. Forcing immediate results is an act of violence against life itself. Life has rhythms that cannot be hastened without losing its essence. The maturing of a tree, the blooming of a seed, the silent process of healing or of personal transformation, all of this happens at the right time, not when we want it, but when we are ready. Patience is not passivity. It is profound action, a trust in the process, an acceptance of what cannot be rushed. Practicing active patience is focusing on the process, not on the haste for the result. It is understanding that what is built slowly is more solid, more stable, more lasting. What is forced into existence often does not endure. Like the seed that, even if it wanted to, could not hasten its own blooming, so too must we trust that there is a right time for everything. Forcing before its time is preventing life from maturing fully. Serenity is born when, instead of wanting everything to happen now, we choose to accompany time with presence, with surrender, with the trust that, yes, what needs to bloom will bloom. And until then, we can rest, knowing that we are exactly where we should be. By realizing the power of patience, you understand that often, silence communicates more than any forced word. And it is precisely about the power of silence that we reflect next. We live surrounded by discourse, justifications, and explanations that accumulate in conversations, social media, and incessant thoughts. There is an unspoken belief that everything must be said, that every feeling must be shared, that every action requires explanation. But silence often is more effective, more profound, more transformative than any carefully chosen word. Epictetus, master of restraint and sobriety, advised, "Do not speak too much of yourself. Others already think more than they should." This phrase is not an invitation to isolation, but a reminder that not everything needs to be said. The need to explain, to justify, to convince often arises more from insecurity than from a real need for communication. Silence is not absence, it is refined presence. Before speaking, there is an essential question. Will this improve upon the silence? If not, perhaps the best choice is to maintain quiet, preserve peace, trust that the essential is already being communicated by the way you live and not merely by what you say. Like the tranquil lake, whose beauty lies precisely in not needing to move to impress, so too can life find serenity by abandoning the constant need for expression. Not every idea needs to be verbalized. Not every conflict needs to be resolved with words. Often, silence holds more wisdom, more respect, and more strength. Learning to choose silence is not renouncing communication, but elevating its quality, transforming it into something more sincere, more serene, more truthful. By trusting in the strength of silence, you perceive the need to release excessive desires. And it is about how unrestrained desire fuels restlessness that we now speak. Restlessness arises, almost always, from the excess of desires we silently accumulate. Desires that do not emerge from genuine need, but from comparison, from vanity, from the expectation that having more, doing more, or being more will finally make us feel sufficient. But to desire too much is to live forcing life to bend to our longings, turning each day into a draining and often empty battle. Seneca, with his clarity and austerity, stated, "Poor is not the one who has little, but the one who desires much." The accumulation of desires creates an invisible chain that keeps us restless, anxious, and paradoxically unsatisfied, even when we achieve what we so desperately wanted. Because as soon as one desire is fulfilled, another immediately arises, keeping us trapped in an endless cycle of effort and frustration. The less one desires, the less one forces, and the more one truly lives. Reducing desires is not renouncing joy, but creating space for lightness. It is realizing that many of the things we fight for are not essential, but only noise, distractions, weights that prevent us from walking freely. Like the traveler who, by dropping excessive baggage, discovers that they can walk farther and lighter, so too those who review their desires find immediate relief, a quiet peace, a clarity that transforms the way they live. What is essential is little, and the little, when well chosen, is enough. Serenity does not lie in conquering everything, but in desiring only what, in fact, is necessary for a simple, coherent, and fulfilling life. By reviewing your desires, you realize that life does not need to be forced to be meaningful. And it is about that serenity, as the highest form of strength, that we now continue. There is a silent belief, often unconscious, that a meaningful life must be grand, marked by visible achievements, expressive conquests, and a constant intensity of accomplishments. As if the value of an existence lay in the number of battles fought, and not in the quality of the silence that sustains it. But living with meaning does not require excessive force. nor a relentless quest to prove something to the world. Marcus Aurelius, emperor and philosopher, deeply understood this truth. He taught, "Live according to nature, and that is enough." Harmony with one's own nature, with one's own essence, with the natural limits and rhythms of life is more than sufficient. It is not necessary to force life to be grand for it to be fulfilling. It does not need to be turned into a spectacle for it to have value. A simple, coherent, and serene life is more powerful than an existence marked by constant battles and forced efforts. Serenity is the highest form of strength, for it does not need to show itself, does not need to convince, does not need to conquer. It simply remains, silent, steady, sufficient. Daily, there is a question that can bring us back to our essence. Are I living coherently, or just forcing myself to seem strong? This questioning is an invitation to honesty, to simplicity, and to the courage to abandon the masks of unnecessary effort. Like the oak that grows slowly, silently, and becomes an impossible presence to ignore, without ever having forced its own growth, so too can we allow our lives to flourish in their own time, in their own rhythm, with their own beauty. True strength is not in imposition, but in the serenity of those who know that simply they already are. When you understand that, simply, you are already enough, you realize that by stopping forcing, you find peace. And it is about that quiet peace that we now conclude. Forcing life is often a silent expression of fear and anxiety. It is the desperate gesture of someone trying to control the uncontrollable, of someone insisting on keeping what, by its very nature, should already have been released. It is the desperate attempt to bend existence to one's desires, forgetting that life is not forced. It is simply embraced. Flowing with life, on the other hand, is a side of wisdom and peace. It is the serene recognition that not everything depends on us, that there are greater forces and natural rhythms that deserve to be respected. It is the conscious choice to let go, to trust, to rest in the certainty that life follows its course, with or without our resistance. Marcus Aurelius remains the final symbol of this wisdom, the emperor who, even in the face of immense challenges, did not force life, but accepted each day as it came, seeking not to control, but to understand. He knew that serenity does not come from power over things, but from the lucid acceptance of what they are. Epictetus reinforces this image, the man who, even deprived of external freedom, lived with the most complete internal freedom. He did not try to force the world to be different, but adjusted to it, cultivating a silent and invincible peace. Before trying once again to force a situation, stop, breathe, and ask, is this really necessary, or can I simply allow life to follow its course? Perhaps the answer is the beginning of a lighter path, freer, more true. Like the river that, by not fighting against its banks, finds its way to the ocean, so too does the one who stops forcing discover the silent vastness of inner peace, a peace that does not shout, does not impose, but simply remains steady, serene,
incontestable, because life does not need to be forced to be full. It only needs to be lived with presence, with acceptance, and, above all, with wisdom. If this message touched you, leave in the comments, "I choose to let go and trust." And remember, transform yourself silently and simply. If this video strengthened you, like and subscribe. Thus, you help us spread even more this philosophy of silent and profound transformation.